Warren Cole was 44 years old when his wife of 14 years sat across from him at their kitchen table and slid a document across the marble surface he'd chosen himself. She wanted $100,000 a month, tax-free, deposited directly into a private account he hadn't known existed until 5 days ago. No questions asked, or she'd file for divorce. She said it with the composure of a woman who had been rehearsing that moment for a very long time. She was expecting panic, negotiation, the desperate compliance of a man too in love to think clearly. What she was not expecting was silence, and then a laugh. Quiet, genuine, the kind that doesn't perform anything. Warren picked up the document, looked at it one more time, folded it, and handed it back to her. Then he asked if she was eating breakfast. Diane stared at him like he'd spoken another language. She thought his laugh meant he had nothing. She thought his calm meant she had already won. She had no idea that the man sitting across from her had spent the last 5 days uncovering a betrayal so deep it had roots in a life she'd been building long before she ever said, "I do." And that laugh, the one she mistook for weakness, was the last mistake she would ever make. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The steel beam swung 40 feet above K Street, suspended from a crane cable no thicker than a man's wrist. Warren Cole watched it rise, blueprints rolled in his left hand, hard hat catching the late morning sun. He didn't flinch, he never did. "Column line 7, he said to Marcus, his site foreman. 3 inches east. Marcus nodded, relayed the adjustment into his radio, and the beam shifted. It settled into position like a bone finding its socket. Perfect. This was the Meridian Project, a 12-story mixed-use development in northwest D.C. that would hold 42 residential units above a ground-floor marketplace. One of 3 active builds under Cole and Associates, Warren's firm. His name on the permits, his signature on the drawings, his reputation holding up the financing. He moved through the site the way he moved through everything. With economy. No wasted steps. No wasted words. The crew respected him for it. They'd watched him climb scaffolding in a suit jacket to check a weld point 2 weeks ago. And before that, they'd seen him stay until midnight on a Friday to help resolve a foundation drainage issue that wasn't technically his problem. Warren Cole didn't ask his people to do things he wouldn't do himself. That was the rule. Had been since the beginning, when Cole and Associates was just Warren and a drafting table crammed into a 400-square-foot studio apartment in Pigtown, Baltimore. No associates, no clients, just a 26-year-old kid with a design fellowship from Howard, and the kind of stubbornness that either builds empires or kills you. It built an empire. He checked his watch. 3:45. He handed Marcus the rolled blueprints, clapped him on the shoulder, and walked to his truck. A black Denali that still smelled faintly of sawdust because he refused to stop loading materials into it himself when a delivery ran short. The drive from D.C. to Potomac took 38 minutes. Warren used it the way he always did, in silence. No radio, no podcast. Just the hum of the engine and the slow unwinding of the professional mind, making room for whatever waited at home. The house appeared through a corridor of mature oaks, set back 300 feet from the road, on 2.5 acres of landscaped property. Georgian brick, custom millwork, a roofline that managed to feel both grand and restrained, because Warren had drawn it that way. Every angle, every proportion, every sightline was his. He'd designed this home the way he designed everything, to last. He pulled into the garage and entered through the mudroom, set his keys on the hook, hung his jacket. Diane was in the kitchen. She stood at the island with a glass of sparkling water, wearing a cream silk blouse tucked into tailored trousers, gold at her ears and wrists, full makeup, hair blown out and falling past her shoulders in a way that looked effortless and cost $300 every 2 weeks to maintain. It was 4 o'clock on a Tuesday. "Hey, baby," she smiled. Warm, practiced. "How was your day?" "Good," Warren said. He kissed her cheek. She smelled like bergamot and something floral he couldn't name. "Meridian's ahead of schedule." "That's wonderful." She turned back to her phone. Her thumb moved across the screen, then stopped. She set it face down on the counter. "I was thinking salmon for dinner. That okay?" "Sounds good." They ate at 7. The salmon was perfect, pan-seared, skin crispy, served on a bed of wild rice Diane had learned from a cooking class she'd taken last spring. The conversation moved across familiar, shallow ground. A gala next month. A landscaper who'd overcharged. A friend of Diane's whose daughter was applying to Georgetown. Warren listened, nodded, asked the right questions, noticed, somewhere beneath the surface of his attention, that Diane's eyes never quite settled on his, that her laughter arrived a half-beat too late, that the warmth in her voice had the texture of something rehearsed rather than felt. He noticed, and as he always did, he let it pass. 14 years of marriage had taught him that not every silence meant something, that people were allowed their distances. He was wrong about that, but he didn't know it yet. At 10:15, Warren carried a manila folder from the kitchen to his home office. Quarterly projections Diane had offered to print for him earlier that week. He set it on his desk, and the folder slipped open. A page slid out that didn't belong. A credit card statement. 1 page. Diane's name printed at the top. An account number he had never seen. Warren sat down slowly. He read it the way he read structural reports, line by line, without skipping ahead. The Belmont Charleston Place, Fort High, $200. The mansion on Forsyth Park, Savannah, $3,800. Tiffany & Co. $7,150. A private charter service based in Fort Lauderdale, $1,600. A resort in Nassau, $6,100. Smaller charges scattered between restaurants, spa treatments, a wine shop in the historic district, $43,000. 90 days. All of it during the 3 weekends Diane had told him she was visiting her sister in Atlanta. Warren stared at the statement for a long time. The numbers didn't blur. They stayed sharp, precise, undeniable, the way structural failures always look on paper once you finally see them. He closed the folder, placed it in his desk drawer, turned off the lamp. He went to bed beside his wife. She was already asleep, or performing sleep, her breathing too even, too controlled. Warren lay on his back in the dark, eyes open, watching the ceiling of the house he'd built with his own hands. He did not sleep. The folder sat on his nightstand like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Warren opened his eyes at 4:52, 8 minutes before his alarm. The bedroom was still dark. Diane lay beside him on her side, one hand tucked beneath her pillow, her breathing slow and deep. Real sleep this time. Whatever performance she'd been managing the night before had given way to genuine unconsciousness. He watched her for 10 seconds, maybe 15. The curve of her shoulder beneath the silk pajama top. The small crease between her eyebrows that appeared when she slept deeply, as though even rest required effort from her. 14 years. Warren rose without sound. His feet found the hardwood floor, and he moved through the dark with the precision of a man who had been navigating structures his entire life, knowing where the weight-bearing points were, where the floor would creak if you stepped wrong. He showered in the guest bathroom down the hall, dressed in his closet with the door closed. Navy slacks, a white button-down, work boots he'd swap for dress shoes if needed. By 5:30, he was in the garage. By 5:32, the Denali was pulling down the oak-lined drive. Diane hadn't stirred. He waited until he hit the beltway before making the call. Philip Okafor picked up on the second ring. No grogginess in his voice. No surprise. Just the low, measured tone of a man who was already awake and already thinking. "Warren, I need to ask you some things," Warren said. "Legal things, about my finances." A pause. Brief. Then, "Go ahead." "If I wanted to pull records on every joint account Diane has access to, investment accounts, household accounts, anything connected to my name or my social, what am I allowed to touch?" Philip didn't ask why, didn't ask what happened. The absence of those questions told Warren everything about how long his friend had been waiting for this exact phone call. "You're a co-owner on the joint accounts," Philip said. "You have full legal access to any account bearing your name or funded by your income. Investment accounts, where you're the primary, same. If she has sole accounts funded independently, those get more complicated. But anything routed from your earnings, your firm's distributions, your personal holdings, pull it all. What about an LLC?" Another pause, slightly longer. "Registered where?" "I don't know yet. Virginia, maybe. If your money funded it, directly or through intermediary accounts, you have standing to investigate. If you want to do this properly, you need a forensic accountant working under privilege through my firm. That way, everything stays protected." Warren merged onto 495, the morning still gray around him. "You have someone?" "I have exactly the right person," Philip said. "Her name is Audra James. She's done this kind of work for 15 years. Divorce fraud, asset concealment, threshold evasion. She's seen every version of it. I'll bring her in under my engagement letter so privilege attaches." "How fast?" "I can have her in my office by noon today. Can you get me access to your accounts digitally? Statements, logins, anything Diane wouldn't notice being accessed? I can get you everything. Then get me everything." Philip's voice didn't change pitch, didn't soften, didn't harden. It stayed exactly where it was, flat, competent, ready. "Warren, yeah, you're doing the right thing, and you're doing it the right way." Warren said nothing to that. He hung up, set the phone in the center console, and drove the remaining 20 minutes to the Meridian site in silence. 2 days passed. Warren worked. He checked beam alignments. He reviewed contractor bids for the Bethesda project. He signed off on electrical schematics and took a lunch meeting with a zoning official. He came home at 6:30, kissed Diane's cheek, and ate whatever she'd made or ordered. He asked about her day. She told him about a yoga class, a lunch with a friend named Katrina, a problem with the pool service. He listened, nodded, gave nothing away. On the second night, after Diane went upstairs, Warren sat in his office and opened his laptop. An encrypted email from Philip's firm was waiting. Audra James had attached a preliminary report, 12 pages of account flow, flagged irregularities, and one finding marked urgent. Warren opened the attachment. A Virginia LLC, registered 18 months ago. Entity name, Hargrove Lifestyle Consulting, LLC. Diane's maiden name. The business had no website, no clients, no revenue, no tax filings reflecting income. But it had received 4 wire transfers totaling $214,000 from accounts connected to the shell structure Audra was still tracing. Warren scrolled to the filing document. The registered agent was Diane, and beneath her name, listed as co-registrant and 20% member, Grant Ashby. Warren's hand stopped on the trackpad. His jaw tightened. Just once, just barely, and then released. Grant Ashby. The man who'd sat 2 seats away from him in Advanced Design Studio at Howard, who came from 3 generations of money and still couldn't beat Warren for the Ellsworth Fellowship, who'd shaken Warren's hand at graduation with a smile that never reached his eyes. Warren stared at the name on the screen. The cursor blinked beside it, patient, indifferent. He said nothing. The kitchen smelled like French roast and something else Warren couldn't name at first. Then he placed it. The orange blossom candle Diane only lit when she wanted the room to feel intentional, curated, like a set dressed for a scene she'd already rehearsed. He noticed the staging before he noticed her. 2 mugs on the table. The good ones, the handmade ceramic set from that potter in Asheville she'd insisted on buying 3 years ago. Cream already added to his. A small plate of sliced fruit between them, untouched. The morning light through the bay window hit the marble countertop at an angle that made everything look like a magazine spread. Diane sat at the far end of the kitchen table, straight-backed, legs crossed at the ankle. She wore a cashmere wrap over a simple silk blouse, effortless in the way that took her 45 minutes to assemble. Her hands were folded on the table in front of her. Relaxed, practiced. Warren set his keys on the counter. He'd been at the Meridian site since 7, checking concrete pours. His boots still had dust on them. "Sit down," Diane said. Soft, almost tender. "I made coffee." He sat, pulled the mug toward him, took a sip. The cream was measured exactly right. She'd always known how he took his coffee. That had never been the problem. "Warren?" She said his name the way she said it when she wanted something to land. Full weight on the first syllable. Eye contact held just long enough to communicate seriousness without aggression. "We need to talk about us." He set the mug down. Said nothing. "This isn't working for me," she said. "It hasn't been working for a long time. I think you know that." Warren watched her face. The micro-movements, the slight tilt of her chin. Upward, always upward, that she used when she wanted to appear both vulnerable and in control simultaneously. "I have needs," she continued. "Financial needs, emotional needs. And I've been patient, Warren. I've been more than patient. But I can't keep living in a marriage where I feel like an afterthought." She paused here, waiting for him to fill the silence, to apologize, to ask what he could do differently. He recognized the tactic because she'd used it 100 times over 14 years, the strategic pause that forced him into the role of supplicant. He drank his coffee. Diane's left hand moved to a manila folder that had been resting beside her placemat. She opened it, removed a single document, crisp, formatted, clearly prepared by an attorney, and slid it across the table toward him. "I don't want a war," she said. "I'm giving you the opportunity to avoid one. If you agree to these terms, I'm willing to stay, to work on things." Her voice dropped half a register. "To try." Warren looked down at the document. He read it slowly. Personal monthly allowance of $100,000 deposited directly into a designated private account. Tax-free. No reporting requirement. No approval process. No questions. He read it again. The language was clean. Professional. Someone had been paid well to draft this. $100,000 a month. To a woman who had already taken over $1 million from him through fabricated invoices and shell accounts. Who had funneled his money to a man who despised him, who had married him as a backup plan and spent 14 years cashing checks against his blindness. Warren looked up at Diane, and he laughed. Not loud, not bitter, not performative. A quiet sound, almost gentle, that rose from somewhere deep in his chest and escaped before he could have stopped it even if he'd wanted to. It was the laugh of a man who had just watched the last piece of a puzzle slide into place. The laugh of sudden, total clarity. 14 years. All of it. Right here, on one page. Diane's face changed. The composure she'd held so carefully. The soft eyes. The measured tone. The angle of her chin. All of it flickered. Cracked. Her lips parted slightly. Her eyes narrowed by a fraction. "You're not serious," she said. Warren folded the document once, then twice. He slid it back across the table toward her. "Neither are you," he said. "Not about this." He stood up, walked to the counter, refilled his mug from the French press she'd prepared as part of her stage dressing. The coffee was still hot. "You eating breakfast?" he asked. His back was to her. His voice was the same voice he used every Saturday morning. Easy, unhurried. He turned around with his mug and leaned against the counter. Diane stared at him. The document sat folded between them on the table. Her hands had unclasped. One pressed flat against the surface, fingers slightly spread, as though she needed the contact to steady something shifting beneath her. She didn't answer his question. She was looking at him the way you look at a structure you thought you understood, and realizing, for the first time, that you never read the blueprints correctly. Warren sipped his coffee. He was not running. He was not begging. He was not negotiating. He was building. The morning sun hadn't cleared the tree line when Warren picked up his phone. He typed 2 words to Philip. Schedule it. The reply came in 9 seconds. A time. An address. Nothing else. Philip's office occupied the 14th floor of a glass tower on K Street. The reception area was all dark wood and muted lighting, designed to communicate discretion before a single word was spoken. Warren had been here 100 times over 20 years. Business filings, contract reviews, partnership agreements. Never this. Philip met him at the interior door. Navy suit, no tie, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He gripped Warren's hand, firm, brief, and led him down the corridor to the corner office, blinds already drawn. Door closed behind them with a soft click. Audra James was already seated at the conference table. She had 3 folders open in front of her, a laptop angled toward an empty chair, and a printed timeline pinned flat with her forearm. She looked up when Warren entered. Nodded once. No small talk. Warren sat. Philip settled into the chair beside Audra. He folded his hands on the table. "Audra's going to walk you through the full picture," Philip said. His voice carried the same flat calm he used in depositions. "I need you to hear all of it before you respond." Warren nodded. Audra turned the laptop screen toward him. A spreadsheet filled the display. Color-coded rows stretching back 6 years. She didn't touch the keyboard. She'd already memorized the numbers. "Your wife has been managing household operational expenses since 2018, Audra began. Her voice was precise, clinical, like a doctor reading lab results. Landscaping, maintenance contracts, interior renovations, household staff payroll, vendor relationships. You gave her full authority over those accounts." "I did," Warren said. "She used that authority to build a systematic extraction framework." Audra tapped the first folder. Fabricated invoices. Contractors billed twice for work performed once. Vendors that exist on paper but have no physical address, no employees, no tax filing. Payments routed to accounts she controls or has beneficial interest in. She slid a single page across the table. A list. 37 entries. Each one a payment Warren had never questioned because it came from a household account managed by his wife. Amounts ranging from $8,000 to $47,000. Routine enough to ignore. Frequent enough to bleed. Total extraction from your personal assets over 6 years, Audra said, is between $1.1 and $1.4 million. The number hung in the room. Warren looked at the page. His jaw tightened once. That was all. Audra opened the second folder. 3 of the fabricated invoices, totaling approximately $190,000, were paid to a company called Ashby Property Services, LLC, registered in Fairfax County, Virginia. She paused. The registered agent is Marcus Ashby, Grant Ashby's brother. Warren's hand rested flat on the table. Steady. "The money didn't just leave your accounts," Audra said. "It was routed. Deliberately. To him." Philip leaned forward. He removed his glasses and set them on the table. "Here's what I believe is happening," Philip said. "Ashby is assembling capital for a commercial real estate development in Northern Virginia. Mixed use. $62 million projected build. He's raising investor funds through a private placement, and his pitch materials reference a strategic partnership with Cole & Associates." Philip's eyes held Warren's. That partnership does not exist, was never discussed, was never authorized. Warren said nothing. He's using your name, Philip continued, your firm's reputation, and your wife's stolen money as the foundation for a deal that, based on what Audra and I have reviewed, appears to be fraudulent on multiple levels. He's trading on you, Warren. Every dollar he raises comes with your credibility attached to it like a signature you never signed. The room was quiet, the hum of the building's ventilation system, the distant sound of K Street traffic 14 floors below. Warren looked at the timeline pinned under Audra's arm. 6 years of entries. 6 years of checks he never thought to question, because the woman writing them slept beside him every night. How long, Warren said, to build a case that can't be argued around? Philip didn't hesitate. 3 weeks. I can have filings ready in 3 weeks. Warren looked at the window. The blinds sliced the afternoon light into thin, even bars across the table. 4, he said. I want it airtight. No gaps. Nothing they can wiggle through. Philip nodded. 4. Warren pulled into the driveway at 6:47. The porch lights were on. The front door was unlocked. Diane was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. She turned when she heard his footsteps. Her expression was careful, testing the air between them. Hey, she said. Soft, warm, the voice from before the kitchen table, before the document. I made pasta. Smells good. He kissed her cheek, set his bag down, rolled up his sleeves. How was your week? He asked. She smiled. Relief moved through her shoulders like a held breath releasing. It was good, she said. Quiet. I missed you. Warren handed her the pepper grinder from the counter. Their fingers touched briefly. Tell me about it, he said. She did. She talked about a gallery opening, a lunch with a friend, a dress she'd ordered. He listened to every word, nodded in the right places, asked a follow-up question about the gallery. Diane watched him across the table as they ate. She saw what she wanted to see, a man settling back into his role, a man who had laughed at her demand and was now, perhaps, reconsidering, softening, coming around. She was wrong about all of it. The man across the table was not softening. He was sharpening. The shift came Monday evening. Warren walked through the front door and found Diane at the stove again. Not the careful performance from Saturday. Something different. She was barefoot, hair down, an apron he hadn't seen in years tied at her waist. Music played low from the kitchen speaker, an old Al Green record they'd danced to once at a friend's wedding. I picked up lamb from the butcher, she said, without turning around. That place you like in Georgetown. Warren set his keys on the counter. You didn't have to do that. She looked over her shoulder, smiled. Not the polished smile, the soft one, the one she'd used on him when they were dating. I wanted to, she said. Tuesday. She brought him coffee in his home office, set the mug on his desk, and let her hand trail across his shoulder as she left. Didn't say a word. Wednesday. She suggested they go to dinner, somewhere quiet. She wore the earrings he'd bought her for their 10th anniversary, the ones she'd told him were too simple for her friends' events. Thursday morning, over toast, she said it. I think we were both coming at things the wrong way. She held her coffee in both hands, eyes down, practicing vulnerability. I pushed too hard. I know that. But I think we can find something that works for both of us, if we're honest. Warren looked at her across the table, took a bite of toast, chewed, swallowed. I'd like that, he said. She exhaled, reached across the table and squeezed his hand. He squeezed back, and then he went to work. 3 tracks, running simultaneously. None of them visible from inside the house. Track 1. Every evening after 9, Warren reviewed documents Philip sent to a secure email address. Draft filings for civil lawsuits in 2 jurisdictions. Fraud, conversion, breach of fiduciary duty. Each count supported by Audra's forensic documentation. Each name spelled correctly. each dollar amount verified to the cent. Philip's drafts were meticulous, paragraphs built like load-bearing walls, every clause reinforcing the one before it. Warren read them the way he read blueprints, found one ambiguity in a damages calculation on page 14, flagged it. Philip corrected it within the hour. Track 2. During business hours, Warren authorized a series of structural changes to Cole & Associates' corporate holding entities, asset protections, insurance adjustments, a reallocation of intellectual property rights from one subsidiary to another. All of it legal. All of it routine for a firm of Cole & Associates' size. All of it invisible to anyone not looking for it. The moves were available precisely because no litigation had yet been filed. Once the lawsuits went live, these protections would already be in place. A foundation poured weeks before the storm arrived. Track 3. Philip's associate made 2 phone calls, confidential, professional, to investors whose names appeared in Ashby's pitch materials Audra had obtained through the discovery process tied to Diane's LLC. The calls were simple. Philip's associate identified himself as counsel for Cole & Associates. He asked whether the investors were aware that no partnership existed between Cole & Associates and Ashby's development group. He asked whether they had independently verified the claims in Ashby's prospectus. He did not accuse. He did not threaten. He asked questions. The first investor, a private equity group out of McLean, requested a follow-up meeting within the day. The second, a family office in Bethesda, went silent for 36 hours. Then the family office formally withdrew its commitment. $8.2 million. Gone from Ashby's deal in a single email. Ashby would feel that. He wouldn't know where it came from. Not yet. Friday evening, Warren drove to Baltimore. The row house on Garrison Boulevard hadn't changed in 30 years. Same brick steps. Same iron railing his father had welded himself. Same smell inside. Lemon cleaner and something sweet baking. Beverly Cole, 70, stood at the kitchen counter slicing tomatoes. She wore a house dress and reading glasses pushed low on her nose. She didn't look up when Warren came through the back door. "Wash your hands," she said. "Cornbread's almost done." He washed his hands, set the table, poured 2 glasses of sweet tea from the pitcher in the refrigerator. They sat across from each other, the same table where he'd done homework as a boy, where his father had eaten his last meal at home before the hospital took him. Beverly ate in silence for several minutes. Then she set down her fork, folded her hands, looked at her son with steady eyes that had been reading children and adults for 4 decades. "How long have you known?" she asked. Warren met her gaze, didn't look away. He told her. All of it. The credit card statement, Audra's findings, the $1 million, Ashby, the LLC, the investor fraud, the lawsuits being prepared. Beverly listened without interrupting. Her expression didn't change. Her hands stayed folded. When he finished, the kitchen was quiet, except for the tick of the wall clock above the stove. She didn't cry. "I watched that woman scroll through her phone during your father's entire funeral," Beverly said. Her voice was even, not angry, certain. Every prayer, every hymn, her thumb just moving across that screen like she was waiting for something more interesting to happen. Beverly picked up her tea, took a small sip. "I knew then. I just didn't know how to tell you without you thinking I was just being a mother." Warren sat with that, let it settle into the place where all the other truths had been collecting these past weeks. "You weren't just being a mother," he said. "No," Beverly said. "I wasn't." She reached across the table and put her hand over his. Her palm was dry and warm and strong, the hand that had graded 10,000 papers, that had held his face when he was small, that had never once let go of anything that mattered. "You handle it the way you need to handle it," she said. "And you call me when it's time." Warren nodded. He helped her wash the dishes, wrapped the leftover cornbread in foil, kissed her forehead at the door. drove home through the dark corridor of I-95 with the radio off and the windows cracked, the spring air cool against his face. Diane was already asleep when he got home. The kitchen was clean. A note on the counter in her handwriting. Saved you a plate. XO Warren read the note, set it back down, went upstairs. He brushed his teeth, changed, slid into bed beside the woman who had stolen from him for 6 years, who had loved another man for longer than that, who believed, even now, that warmth and a note and a saved plate could keep him managed. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, Warren Cole slept soundly. Warren made the call at 7:42 a.m. Saturday morning, parked in his driveway, engine off, coffee in the cup holder, still steaming. He pulled up the number Audra had found in the LLC filings, dialed, let it ring. 3 rings, then a voice, smooth, unhurried, the particular ease of a man who had never worried about where his next meal came from. This is Grant. Grant, Warren Cole. A pause, brief, just long enough for Warren to hear the silence rearrange itself. Warren. Ashby's voice recovered quickly, warmed itself into something friendly. Well, it's been a long time. How are you? I'm good. Busy. You know how it goes. Warren took a sip of coffee. Let the pause breathe. Listen, I've been thinking. It's been too many years since we caught up. You free for lunch this week? Maybe Tuesday? Another pause, shorter this time. Warren could almost hear the calculation, the quick mental scan for danger, finding none, defaulting to the assumption that had governed Ashby's entire relationship with Warren, that the working-class kid from Baltimore was too simple to be strategic. Tuesday works perfectly, Ashby said. Name the place. Warren named a quiet restaurant in Tyson's Corner. White tablecloths, low ceilings, the kind of place where conversations stayed at the table. I'll be there, Ashby said. Looking forward to it, Warren. Truly. Warren ended the call, finished his coffee, went inside and made breakfast for Diane. Tuesday, 12:15 p.m. Warren arrived 10 minutes early, took a corner table facing the door. He wore a charcoal sweater over a white shirt. No tie, no watch. He'd left the Patek Philippe at home. He wanted to look like what Ashby expected him to be. Simple, earnest, slightly beneath the moment. He ordered water with lemon and read the menu. At 12:22, Grant Ashby walked through the door. Navy suit. Custom. The kind with hand-stitched lapels that cost more than most people's cars. Silk pocket square. Italian shoes that clicked against the tile floor. He scanned the room with the proprietary confidence of a man who believed every space rearranged itself around his entry. He spotted Warren, smiled broadly, crossed the room with his hand extended. Warren. He gripped Warren's hand firmly. Too firmly. The squeeze of a man establishing hierarchy. You look great. Still keeping yourself in fighting shape. Clean living, Warren said. Sit down. I ordered bread. Ashby sat, unbuttoned his jacket, settled into the chair like he owned it. The waiter appeared. Ashby ordered a bourbon. Top shelf, neat, without looking at the menu. So, Ashby said, leaning back, what's new in the world of Warren Cole? I hear the D.C. project is massive. Mixed use, right? Residential and commercial. 32 stories, Warren said. Breaking ground on Phase 2 next month? Incredible. Ashby shook his head. That smile again. Wide, practiced, carrying 20 years of something that looked like admiration, but tasted like resentment. You've really built something, Warren. I always said you would. Warren nodded, took a piece of bread, buttered it slowly. What about you? Warren asked. I hear you've got things moving in Northern Virginia. Ashby's eyes lit up. This was the invitation he'd been waiting for, the chance to perform. Big things, he said. He leaned forward, dropped his voice to the register men use when they want to sound like they're sharing secrets. Commercial mixed use. 60-acre parcel outside Leesburg. Investor interest has been, honestly, Warren, overwhelming. We're talking institutional capital, family offices, the whole spectrum. Warren nodded. What's your timeline on capitalization? You fully committed? 90% there, Ashby said. He swirled his bourbon. A few final tranches to close, but the fundamentals are rock solid. The partnerships we've structured, they give investors real confidence. Partnerships, Warren repeated. Neutral, curious, strategic ones, Ashby said. Firms with track records, names people trust. He met Warren's eyes and held them. Not a flicker of shame, not a trace of guilt. Just the easy confidence of a man who believed his lies were indistinguishable from truth. Warren let the silence sit for 3 seconds. Then he smiled slightly and asked about the lamb. They ordered. They ate. Ashby talked for 40 minutes. About markets, about opportunity zones, about the generational wealth his project would create. Warren listened, asked a question about the investor structure, asked another about the partnership agreements, who drafted them, what the disclosure requirements looked like. Ashby answered each one, carefully, vaguely, but enough. Enough. The plates were cleared. Coffee arrived. Ashby was relaxed now. Expansive. He'd spent an hour performing for a man he considered his audience, and he was satisfied with the show. Warren set down his cup. Grant. Something in the tone. Ashby's hand paused midway to his coffee. I want to ask you something directly, Warren said, and I'd appreciate a direct answer. Ashby's smile held, but his eyes sharpened. Of course. I've heard, from more than one source, that Cole & Associates appears in your investor materials as a strategic partner. Warren's voice was level, unhurried, the same tone he used when telling a client that the foundation they'd chosen wouldn't hold. I want to be clear. No such partnership exists. It was never discussed, never authorized. The smile left Ashby's face. It didn't collapse. It withdrew, pulled back behind a mask of careful stillness that told Warren everything he needed to know about what lived behind it. Warren, I think there may be a misunderstanding. There isn't. Warren folded his napkin, set it beside his plate. I'm not here to argue about it. I'm here to give you a courtesy I don't owe you. He looked directly into Ashby's eyes, held them the way a blueprint holds a building. Steady, structural, immovable. You have 48 hours to remove my firm's name from every document, every deck, every prospectus it appears in. Quietly, completely, Ashby's jaw tightened. His fingers pressed flat against the tablecloth. And if you don't, Warren said, Philip Okafor will be contacting the SEC Monday morning. And I don't think either of us wants that conversation. Warren reached into his pocket, placed 3 20s on the table, stood. Lunch is on me, he said. Good to see you, Grant. He walked out of the restaurant without looking back. The spring air hit his face. He breathed it in. Behind him, through the glass, Ashby sat motionless at the table for 11 seconds. Then his hand went to his phone. He called Diane at 1:47 p.m. She answered on the second ring. What followed? The panicked questions, the half-formed cover stories, the texts sent in rapid succession, the voicemails left and deleted and left again. All of it flowed through devices already subject to Philip's civil discovery authorization. Every word captured. Every timestamp logged. Every lie documented with the quiet precision of a system that does not care about intention, only evidence. They were building the rope together now, braiding it tight, handing it to the people who would use it. And neither of them knew. 2 days after the lunch, Warren's phone buzzed at 3:15 p.m. He was standing on the 4th floor of the D.C. project, watching his structural engineer test load bearings on the eastern wall. The wind came through the open framework in cold sheets, Philip's name on the screen. Warren stepped away from the crew, answered. "You free this afternoon?" Philip's voice was even, measured, the way he sounded when he was being careful with something. "I can be there by 5. "Good. Come alone." Warren pocketed the phone, watched the engineer tap the wall with his knuckle, listening for the sound that told him whether what he'd built would hold. Philip's office at 5:07 p.m. The blinds were drawn again, the same configuration as before. Philip behind his desk, a printed document face down in front of him. A glass of water he hadn't touched. But something was different this time. Philip's hands were folded. His expression was carefully neutral, which meant it wasn't neutral at all. Warren sat down, didn't speak. Philip studied him for a moment. Then he said, "Audra found something else. During the final discovery review." He tapped the document with one finger but didn't turn it over. "It's not financial." "Not exactly." Warren waited. "Diane had a cloud backup linked to the household account. Old one. Probably forgot it existed. It auto-synced with an email address she stopped using years ago." Philip paused. Audra flagged a thread of messages between Diane and Ashby. Warren's hands stayed still in his lap. "What kind of messages?" Philip turned the document over, slid it across the desk. "Read it." Warren picked it up. 4 pages. Audra's summary on top. Dates, context, source verification. Below that, excerpts. Fragments of emails pulled from a digital grave. The dates were the first thing that hit him. The messages began 8 months before Warren proposed to Diane. They were intimate, familiar, the language of 2 people who had been together long enough to have shorthand, inside jokes, a rhythm. Ashby's voice in the emails was different from the polished performance Warren had seen at lunch. Looser, warmer, possessive in ways that made Warren's stomach tighten. Then came the break. March of that year. Ashby ending it. Not cruelly, almost casually. The tone of a man who believed he could pick something up again whenever he wanted. "I need to figure some things out. You understand." Diane's response was 3 lines long, controlled, already calculating. 6 months later, she married Warren. He turned to the second page. The thread went silent for 4 years. Then, a message from Ashby. Newly divorced, casual, testing the water. "Been thinking about you? Coffee sometime?" Diane's reply came in under an hour. Warren read it twice. The warmth in it, the immediate availability, the way she wrote about her life with Warren. Not with hatred, not even with boredom. With the detached efficiency of someone describing a job. "Things are fine here, stable. He works constantly. I have time." Warren set the document down. The room was very quiet. The hum of the building's ventilation, the distant sound of traffic on K Street. Philip said nothing. Warren looked out the window. The city was blue-gray in the early evening light. Office buildings glowing from inside. People moving on sidewalks below, carrying briefcases and bags, going home to lives that were real or weren't. 14 years. He'd built her a house, designed it himself. Every room, every angle, every window placed to catch the morning light she said she loved. He'd worked 16-hour days, so she'd never want for anything. He'd believed that what they had was real, because he had made it real with his hands, his hours, his devotion. But she'd walked into it already belonging to someone else. He was the foundation she poured herself over until something better came back around. Warren breathed in, breathed out. His reflection in the window was still, composed. The same face his crew saw every morning. The same face Diane had looked at across 1,000 dinners without ever truly seeing. He turned to Philip. "Schedule the confrontation." Philip nodded. "Once. I'll have everything ready by Friday." Warren stood, put his hands in his pockets, walked to the door, stopped. Both lawsuits, filed the same morning. "Already structured for simultaneous filing," Philip said. "2 jurisdictions, the moment you give the word." Warren nodded. Then he said, "I'm going to call my mother. I want her there." Philip looked at him. Something moved behind his eyes. Not surprise, not pity. Recognition. The understanding of a man who knew what Beverly Cole meant to her son, and what it meant that Warren wanted her in the room. "Good," Philip said. "That's good." Warren drove home through evening traffic, pulled into his driveway, sat in the car for 2 minutes with the engine off. Then he picked up his phone and called Beverly. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. "Baby." "Mama." He closed his eyes. "I need you to come to the house Friday. Late morning." A pause. "Is it time?" "It's time." "I'll be there." He went inside, made dinner, ate across from Diane, who told him about a gallery opening she wanted to attend. He listened, nodded, smiled when she smiled, and felt, beneath the calm surface of his chest, the clean and final settling of something that had been unfinished for far too long. Friday, 10:42 a.m. Sunlight came through the living room windows in long, clean rectangles. Warren had designed this room with southern exposure, floor-to-ceiling glass that opened onto the back garden, white oak floors, a ceiling that rose 14 feet at its peak. He'd drawn it on paper before he could afford to build it. Every angle was deliberate. Every proportion was his. Beverly sat in the armchair by the window. She wore a navy dress and low heels. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her posture was straight. She did not fidget. She did not look around. She simply sat there the way she'd sat in classrooms for 35 years, watching, waiting, already knowing. Warren stood near the dining table. A manila folder rested on its surface. He wore a plain white shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearms. No tie, no performance. He texted Diane, "Come to the living room when you're ready." Footsteps on the stairs, the soft click of heels on hardwood. Diane appeared in the doorway wearing cream slacks and a silk blouse, her hair pulled back, already composing her face into something pleasant. She saw Beverly. The pause was small, maybe half a second, but Warren caught it. The way her lips parted, the way her right hand reached for the doorframe and then pulled back. "Beverly," Diane said. Her voice was light, almost warm. But the warmth didn't land anywhere. "I didn't know you were coming." Beverly looked at her, said nothing, didn't smile. Diane turned to Warren. "What's this about?" "Sit down," Warren said. Not a command, an instruction. The same tone he used on site, when something needed to be addressed, and there was no way around it. Diane sat. The couch, the one she'd chosen 2 years ago, $14,000, Italian linen, delivered by men who called her ma'am. She crossed her legs, her fingers laced together in her lap, and Warren recognized the gesture for what it was, a posture of control, rehearsed calm. He opened the folder. "I'm going to walk you through what I know," he said. "I'm not going to raise my voice. I'm going to be specific. And when I'm done, you'll understand where things stand." Diane's chin lifted slightly. "Warren, if this is about the conversation we had..." "It's not." He pulled the first sheet. Audra's summary of the joint investment account transfers. 2 years of withdrawals, all beneath the reporting threshold. $380,000. "You've been moving money out of our joint investment account since 2021, he said. "Small amounts, carefully timed, $380,000. Diane didn't blink. "That account was joint. I had every right." "You did." Warren set the sheet down, pulled the next. "But you also inflated the household management expenses you controlled for 6 years. Fabricated invoices. Contractors billed double for work that was never done. Vendors that don't exist." He turned the page toward her. "Audra estimates between 1.1 and 1.4 million. Diane's lips pressed together. A micro-movement. 3 of those invoices," Warren continued, "went to a company registered to Grant Ashby's brother." Now her eyes changed. Not panic, not yet, but something shifting behind them. Recalculating. "The LLC you registered in Virginia," Warren said. Lifestyle consulting. Zero revenue. Co-registered with Grant Ashby. The wire transfers it received trace back to shell accounts you controlled. He pulled the next sheet. The investor materials. Ashby's name. Cole and Associates listed as a strategic partner. He used my name, Warren said. My firm. My reputation. To raise money from investors for a deal I never authorized. Diane's hand moved to her throat. Warren, you don't understand the full picture. I do. He pulled the last pages from the folder, set them in front of her. The emails. These are from a cloud backup you forgot was linked to our household account, he said. Messages between you and Grant, starting 8 months before I proposed to you. Diane looked at the pages, didn't touch them. He ended it, Warren said. And you married me. The silence that followed was absolute. Beverly didn't move. The sunlight didn't shift. The house held its breath. Then Diane spoke. Her voice was lower now, softer, the tone she used when she wanted him to feel responsible for her pain. You were never here, Warren. You know that. 60-hour weeks. 70. I was alone in this house for years. Can you honestly say you gave me what I needed? Warren looked at her, steadily. Is that why you opened the first account 4 months after our wedding? Diane's mouth opened, closed. Nothing came. Warren waited, gave her the space, the way he always had. She shifted, leaned forward. Her voice dropped to something almost conspiratorial. We can handle this between us. I'll return a portion, a significant portion. We can settle this privately. No lawyers beyond what's necessary. Warren, please. There's no reason to. Warren closed the folder. The lawsuits were filed this morning, he said. Both of them. Philip handled it. Diane went still. From the chair by the window, Beverly spoke. Her voice was quiet, clear. It carried the weight of 70 years and the precision of a woman who had chosen each word before she arrived. You should have loved him right when you had the chance. Diane looked at Beverly, then at Warren. Her mouth moved once, the beginning of something, but nothing came out. No strategy presented itself, no angle revealed itself. The performance had no audience left. Warren stood. He picked up the folder, tucked it under his arm, looked at Diane one last time, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with the steady gaze of a man who had finally finished building something he didn't want to build. He walked to his office, stepped inside, and closed the door quietly behind him. The letters went out on a Thursday. Philip's office sent them by certified mail and email simultaneously. 6 envelopes, 6 investors, each one containing a 3-page legal notice printed on cream bond paper with the firm's letterhead in clean black type. The language was precise, clinical, the kind of language that doesn't raise its voice because it doesn't need to. The notice informed each recipient that Cole and Associates had never authorized, endorsed, or entered into any strategic partnership with Grant Ashby or any entity associated with his Northern Virginia development. It stated that the use of Cole & Associates' name, reputation, and project portfolio in investor solicitation materials constituted unauthorized misrepresentation. It advised each investor to seek independent legal counsel immediately regarding the validity of any commitments made based on those materials. 2 investors withdrew before sundown. Their attorneys sent identical emails to Ashby's office, formal withdrawal of commitment, demand for return of deposited funds, reservation of all legal rights. By Friday morning, a third followed. By Monday, the deal was dead. The securities complaint landed on Tuesday. Philip had filed it 10 days earlier, timed, like everything else, to arrive in sequence rather than all at once. The Virginia Division of Securities opened a formal investigation into Ashby's investor solicitation practices. The complaint cited material misrepresentation in offering documents, unauthorized use of a third party's professional credentials, and potential violations of state securities registration requirements. Ashby's attorney, A silver-haired litigator named Harmon, who had represented the Ashby family for 15 years, reviewed the complaint, reviewed the civil lawsuit Warren had filed, reviewed the investor withdrawal letters, and made a decision. Within 72 hours, Harmon's firm issued a public statement that it was no longer representing Grant Ashby in any capacity related to the Northern Virginia development or associated matters. The statement was 2 sentences long. It said nothing about the reasons. It didn't need to. In legal circles, the withdrawal itself was the message. Then came the partners. 2 men, David Leung and Richard Pace, had co-invested personal capital into Ashby's deal based on representations he'd made about the project's institutional backing. When Philip's letters reached the investor pool, Leung and Pace hired their own forensic team. What they found matched what Audra had already documented: inflated projections, fabricated partnership agreements, and operating accounts that showed funds being redirected to personal expenses rather than development costs. They filed suit against Ashby on a Wednesday. Fraud. Breach of fiduciary duty. Conversion. The claims mirrored Warren's almost exactly, which meant that when the cases eventually consolidated, Ashby would face a wall of identical allegations from multiple directions, each one reinforcing the others. Grant Ashby, who had arrived at that lunch in his power suit, smiling, certain that the working-class kid from Baltimore could never touch him, was now standing in the wreckage of everything he'd tried to build on someone else's name. His family trust was nearly depleted. His professional reputation was public rubble. The deal he'd staked everything on, the one that was supposed to restore the Ashby name to what it had been before his divorce, before the bad investments, before the slow bleed of old money meeting new expenses, was gone. He called Warren on a Thursday evening. The phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. He sent an email the next morning. It was 3 paragraphs long. It mentioned their shared history. It suggested there had been misunderstandings. It proposed a conversation, man to man, no attorneys, to find a resolution that served everyone's interests. Philip responded within the hour. 1 line, "Please direct all future communications to my office." Diane watched it happen from across the Potomac. She saw Harmon's withdrawal statement shared in a legal newsletter she still subscribed to. She saw the investor lawsuits mentioned in a Northern Virginia business journal. She saw the silence from Ashby, who had not called her in 6 days, who had not answered her last 3 texts, who was now focused entirely on his own survival. She called her attorney on a Friday afternoon, Marcus Webb, the same man who had drafted the $100,000 allowance agreement she'd slid across the kitchen table with such confidence. Webb already knew Philip had contacted him 2 weeks earlier, a professional courtesy, he'd called it, informing him that his client might face criminal referral and that outstanding legal fees should be considered at risk. Webb was direct. He had always been direct. That was why Diane hired him. "The prenuptial agreement is enforceable," he said. "I've reviewed it 3 times. There's no ambiguity. There has to be. The fraud claims eliminate any spousal support argument you might have raised. The forensic record is comprehensive. If this goes to trial, you lose more than you would in settlement. And settlement, at this point, means accepting whatever terms his team offers." Diane was quiet. "You should prepare for the worst," Webb said. "And you should do it quickly." She set the phone down on the kitchen counter. The marble counter in the kitchen Warren had designed, in the house Warren had built. The exit she had spent 14 years engineering, dollar by dollar, document by document, smile by careful smile, had closed around her like a trap she'd built with her own hands. The steel rose 30 feet above him, raw and honest against the February sky. Warren stood inside the skeleton of Building C, the 3rd structure in a 5-building mixed-income development on the east side of Baltimore, 6 blocks from the apartment where his mother had raised him. The wind came through the open frame without apology, carrying the smell of concrete dust and cold metal. His hard hat was scuffed at the brim. His boots were caked with the red-brown mud that Baltimore construction sites always seem to produce, no matter the season. He'd taken this project at 40% below his standard rate. His project manager had raised an eyebrow. Philip had raised both. But Warren had walked this block as a kid, had passed the empty lot where Building C now stood every morning on his way to school, watching it collect broken glass and tall weeds and the particular neglect that cities reserve for neighborhoods they've decided not to see. Now there was steel here, load-bearing columns sunk 40 feet into bedrock, a frame that would hold 62 units, some market rate, some subsidized, all designed with the same care, the same materials, the same attention to light and airflow. You wouldn't be able to tell which units were which from the outside. That was the point. Warren ran his hand along a vertical beam. The metal was cold and smooth under his palm. Solid. Warren. Philip appeared from behind a temporary partition wall, hard hat tilted at an angle that suggested he'd forgotten he was wearing it. He was squinting at his phone, scrolling with his thumb. Your new project manager submits invoices like a man who has never seen a spreadsheet. I'm looking at line items that say, and I'm reading this directly, miscellaneous structural. What does that mean? What structure? Which miscellaneous? Warren smiled. A real one. Tell him I said to itemize. I've told him 3 times. He responds with a thumbs-up emoji. Philip looked up from his phone, disgusted. A thumbs up. From a grown man. Warren's phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He pulled it out. A message from Audra James, the first he'd received from her in 5 weeks. Final civil judgment entered this morning. Combined award, $1.87. Enforceable immediately. Congratulations, Warren. He read it once, read it again. The number sat in his chest for a moment, not as triumph, not as vindication, but as a period at the end of a very long sentence. He pocketed the phone, looked back up at the frame. Good news? Philip asked. He'd been watching. Audra. Judgment's in. Philip nodded slowly. Didn't ask the number. He already knew what it would be. He'd built the case that produced it. Instead, he put his phone away and stood beside Warren, both of them looking up at the steel. Hell of a thing you're building here, Philip said quietly. Warren said nothing, but he agreed. Diane had moved into a 2-bedroom rental in Falls Church 3 months ago. The divorce was final. The prenuptial agreement held without challenge. Webb had advised her not to contest it, and for once she'd listened. The civil fraud judgment offset her settlement so dramatically that what remained was barely enough to cover 18 months of modest living. No Potomac estate, no investment portfolio, no lifestyle consulting LLC, no monthly allowance of any kind. The house Warren designed, every beam, every angle, every window placed to catch the morning light, belonged to him. The firm belonged to him. His name belonged to him again. Beverly arrived at 7 that evening with a foil-covered pan and the same canvas bag she'd carried for 30 years. Warren met her at the front gate of the construction site. She looked up at the steel frame and nodded once, slowly, the way she nodded when a student finally got an answer right after weeks of trying. Bigger than I thought, she said. 5 buildings when it's done, 62 units in this one alone. She handed him the pan. Sweet potato pie. The smell reached him through the foil. Brown sugar, cinnamon, butter. Home distilled into a single dish. They sat in the site office, a temporary trailer with fluorescent lights, and a folding table covered in blueprints. Beverly didn't ask about Diane, didn't ask about the judgment, didn't ask about any of it. She asked about the buildings. Warren talked for 30 minutes. Unit layouts. The community garden planned for the courtyard between buildings B and C. The daycare space on the ground floor of Building A. The way he'd angled the upper floors to maximize afternoon light. Beverly listened to every word, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee, her eyes steady on his face. When she left, she kissed his cheek and said, "Your father would have liked to see this one." Warren nodded, couldn't speak for a moment, didn't need to. After her taillights disappeared down the block, Warren walked back to Building C. He sat on the concrete steps that would eventually lead to the main entrance. Just raw poured concrete now, still rough at the edges. The sun was dropping behind the city skyline, painting the steel frame in shades of copper and gold. The February air bit at his face. He didn't move. 14 years. He thought about what they cost him. The money? Yes. The time? Certainly. But more than that, the years of building a life for someone who was never in the room with him, the years of reading her silence as contentment when it was calculation, the years of loving a performance and calling it a marriage. It had cost him something he couldn't put a dollar figure on, a kind of innocence about people, a willingness to assume the best without evidence. That was gone now, and he didn't mourn it. But he thought about what those years had built in him too, despite everything, despite her. Discipline so deep it had become structural, part of his frame, load-bearing, permanent. Patience that didn't bend under pressure but redirected it. The absolute refusal to panic when the ground shifted beneath him. The knowledge, earned, not inherited, that a man who built himself once could build himself again. Those were hers to take credit for, in a way she'd never intended and would never understand. Warren sat on those rough steps as the last light bled from the sky, and the steel frame above him turned from gold to silver to shadow. The city hummed around him, traffic, distant music, a dog barking somewhere on the next block. Baltimore, the place that made him. He was not bitter. He was clear. The frame rose above him, open on every side. No walls yet. No roof. Just structure and space. The bones of something real, waiting for the rest of itself to arrive. Warren looked up through the steel at the darkening sky, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he saw only open space, and everything he still had left to build. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.